Rice. Oops, I gotta get this better. I'm the current president of SRUW, the Society of Rice University Women, and which is different from the Women's Club. But after it takes a little bit of getting used to, I know it took me, but you can always call on Amanda and she can help you straighten things out. And she's more apt to get it right than I am. I shouldn't say that. I'm supposed to be being efficient. But Amanda Martindale is our new liaison with the Association of Rice Alumni. And we're going to miss Carrie, and Amanda knows it. Carrie kind of spoiled us. Are there anybody outside Houston here? Oh, there's Daryl. Yes, you are. Now, do you go by Daryl?
No, I go by Dean.
Dean, okay.
Good.
That wasn't an additional mistake I've made.
No.
Well, we're glad to have you here, and we're very eager to hear what you have to say to us this evening. I want to introduce our officers. Ann Green is our vice president. I saw Ann. There you are. If you'll raise your hand. Julie Connor is our immediate past president. Where's
here? She's here. Yeah, she's here.
Yeah, there. Yeah. And Nancy Flatt is the treasurer. Joyce Kamala is our recording secretary. Our corresponding secretary is Linda Wild, and I think you all have been hearing from her. Carol Ann Ship is the officer who keeps me in line and correct. And we have Wendy Germani, Sally Yates, who are members of the board. We have additional members of the board. Piper Madeline, who is very busy right now with her political campaign, and we appreciate everything she did. She's been our program chairman, and she's so efficient. So it worries me that I'll ever be able to find someone to replace her. Our social media chair is Meg Brigman, and I think, did I get everybody? Anybody checking on me? I think I got everybody, didn't I, Carol Ann? I want to remind everybody that you have to register for every meeting. We appreciate that you register for every meeting because we can kind of keep up with the count of how many we're going to have. And of course, I've already let the cat out of the bag by saying you can use this link for this meeting today, and that would be fine if you can't quite manage getting registered, because I know I have problems. Our field trip to the Holocaust Museum is postponed. We decided that was just taking too many chances, and we'll keep you posted on that. I'm so happy that all of you are here today, and when we start our meetings, would you please mute yourself, mute your audio. And also, if the question comes up in during the talk, put it in the chat box, and then we'll have live questions and answers as well. Gretchen, you want to take? Gretchen is our coordinator for the meeting tonight.
Yes, thanks, Karen. Our speaker tonight is not just an author, he's a prolific one and a best-selling one, and he has lots and lots of stars on Amazon. I believe he went to Delta State University, if I'm not correct, and is a Mississippian by birth, but has lived quite a while in Houston at times. He has a PhD from Rice in medieval history. And I think he's also a librarian, and we all love librarians, at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. And he writes under several names. We've got Honor Hartman. I don't know if you can see that. And Jimmy Ruth Evans and Miranda James. So I'm happy to introduce Jimmy Ruth, Honor, and Miranda, also Dean.
Well, thank you, Gretchen. Yes, I have committed murder under various names. These days, it's just Miranda who's doing the killing. So, and I will tell you a little bit later about, why I have pseudonyms. But as Gretchen said, yes, I grew up in Mississippi on a farm and went to Delta State here in Mississippi and got a bachelor's and master's in history. And then I went off to Houston, 22 years old, never having lived in a big city before, and was promptly scared to death by the size of Houston, because Houston has more people in it than the whole state of Mississippi. I mean, we're just not quite at 3 million people here in the state of Mississippi now. But I lived in Houston for 33 years, and then I moved back here 7 years ago to take a job at the University of Mississippi Medical Center Library. And, it's a little bit of a culture shock after being in Houston for so long, because I discovered a lot of places are closed on Sunday here in Mississippi, and very few things are open 24 hours like they are in Houston. It's definitely a slower pace of life, but I don't have to deal with the traffic. No more West Loop or Southwest Freeway unless I come to visit. And you would laugh at what they consider a traffic jam here. It's really, really funny. But, anyway, I'm glad to be back. I have family here. I'm the 7th generation in Mississippi. And I have cousins who now have grandchildren, great-grandchildren. So we've been here for 10 generations now, I think. But anyway, I loved my time in Houston. I loved my time at Rice. Professor Catherine Drew was my advisor. And I don't know how many of you might have had her as a student, but she taught ancient and medieval history. And she was one of the world she's still with us at nearly 100. I think she'll be 99 this year. Her mother lived to be over 100, so I'm betting on Mrs. Drew to make it to 100 too. But anyway, she's one of the world's foremost experts on medieval law, and it was a privilege to study with her. But I also stumbled across a bookstore not long after I moved to Houston called Murder by the Book over there on Bissonnette. I moved to Houston in August 1981, and the store had been open a year then. And I became a customer because I've loved murder mysteries since I was about 10 years old, when I discovered Nancy Drew, and then all the other juvenile detectives. And in May of 1984, I started working there part-time. And that was, sort of a dream job for me, working in a bookstore and, reading lots of mysteries. I would, during grad school, once I had finished a major project, a big seminar paper or something, I would spend the weekend reading murder mysteries, sort of to clear my circuits out. And it worked pretty well. I would read, 6, 7, 8 mysteries in a weekend, almost nonstop, with breaks for sleeping, of course. But it helped keep me sane. I didn't have the urge to go out and kill anyone myself after reading all those murder mysteries, because, there is something about graduate school that does occasionally, turn your thoughts toward murder. And in fact, I did write a mystery called Death by Dissertation, which is set in a very fictionalized version of the history department at Rice. And I had a lot of fun with that. But when I graduated Rice, there were between 200 and 300 applicants for every medieval history job, and there weren't that many of them. So I ended up not getting a job as a history professor. So I found a job at the Medical Center Library in Houston and started sort of down on the rung. And eventually I went to library school and got my library science master's degree, because in order to progress, as a librarian and make more money, you have to have the master's degree, whatever. And so I did that, and I left the library world for about 9 years and went back to the bookstore full time to be the manager. And then at some point I realized, I'm getting older, I need to think more about retirement. So I managed to go back to the Medical Center Library for a few more years in order to get, better pension and so forth and so on. But I continued to work at the bookstore. All in all, I put in 30 years at Murder by the Book. And Murder by the Book has now been open 41 years and still going strong, thankfully. But the experience, from working in the bookstore and talking to customers and seeing what they like and helping them find books, that made the job fun, frankly. And I got people who would follow me, and if I said, you need to read this book, they would buy it and, and read it. And that's quite a gratifying feeling, but it also keeps you humble, because I didn't dare recommend a book I didn't like just to sell it, because they'd come back and beat me over the head with it, So, but it's a lot of fun. But I learned a lot about the mystery genre, because, in addition to the things I liked, I had to know about the other types of mysteries. Like didn't read at the time, I didn't read spy novels, but I had to know who the major authors were and stuff. So it helped me get a broad appreciation for the various types of mysteries. And I also, learned about the business of publishing, which stood me in good stead later on when I became a published author. So it was, a good education. My first mystery, adult mystery I wrote the summer of 1985, I was house sitting for Mrs. SRUW and her husband while they were in Europe. And so I made use of the electric typewriter at their house and worked on this book in between taking care of their two cranky cats. And I, by that time I'd been working at the bookstore, and I had met an editor or two at various mystery events. So I sent my book off, hopefully, to an editor, and she read it and she sent it back. She said, I like this, but I just don't think it's for us. And in those days, I didn't handle rejection well, so I put it away. You really have to have a tough hide in publishing, which I eventually had developed. But anyway, that book eventually got published 20 years later as Death by Dissertation. It went through several incarnations, but I had to rewrite it several times, but it eventually got published by a small press. But I learned a lot over the, and that's the thing. I have an advantage over a lot of writers these days, because I know both sides of the business, and that has helped me a lot. I've also got an agent that I've had for 25, 26 years now, who was an editor before she became an agent. So, she understands the market and how it grows and changes and stuff, and really good. And I now had the same editor at Berkeley since 2005. And we have a really good working relationship. And to me, that's just as important as any other relationship, because, she supports my writing, she understands my characters, and she tells me when I've done something that doesn't work. Because I think the most dangerous thing that can happen to a writer is to think that their prose is untouchable. I mean, there's nobody who can't be edited. Even the Bible was edited, to be slightly blasphemous, but, you need that editorial eye, and I've gotten that. And I published 3 books with this small press in Tennessee, 3 Southern mysteries. And then I published 4 mysteries with Kensington under my own name, about a gay American vampire who resides in a little village in England. And they were a lot of fun to write. I described them as Agatha Christie with a touch of Anne Rice. And they were very, cozy, no blood, kind of thing, a vampire story without blood, real blood. But I wanted, to branch out. My publisher dropped the series after 4 books. That was Kensington. And I came up with the idea for a single mom, working mother, who lives in a trailer park in Mississippi, works as a waitress during the day, and then she works at night doing restock at a place called Budget Mart. And I'm sure if you think, you can figure out what that's based on. Because I found out that, that there are people who work all night in those stores just to get stuff back on the shelves, which was something, I never really thought about. So anyway, I wrote 5 books about that character under the name Jimmy Ruth Evans, as I just showed you. And you'll have to pardon me for the sound effects. I have 4 cats, and they're forever doing things while I'm trying to do one of these things. So climbing in boxes, knocking things over. So anyway, I did 5 books as Jimmy Ruth Evans, and my current editor became my editor for the 3rd book in that series. Unfortunately, they didn't take off, and that series got dropped, which really disappointed me because I love those characters. The main character was somewhat based on my late mother. But my editor and her boss both liked my writing, and they wanted to keep me writing for Berkeley. And they knew I was a librarian. They knew I had a couple of cats, and they wanted me to write a series about a librarian with a cat. Now, at the time, Berkeley had published a book called Dewey the Library Cat, which is about a true story about a library in either Illinois or Indiana, I think, or Ohio, where somebody had put a cat in the book return, kitten in the book return, and the library ended up adopting him and keeping him. And he became a much beloved figure in this small town. And I never read the book because I didn't want to be accused of copying it in any way. But anyway, I wrote a few chapters and a synopsis of what became the first book in the series, Murder Past Due. Excuse me, and they liked it. And so they offered me a 3-book contract. Toby's died. That's Toby, my biggest cat. He's also the biggest baby. He whines a lot. Anyway, so I wrote that book and got published. And a couple of weeks after it came out, I was visiting a friend in the nursing home, and he happened to have a room with a vacant bed. And I had been having back problems, so I stretched out on it for a few minutes to let my back rest, and my phone rang. And I look at it, and it's a 212 number. And I'm thinking, okay, who do I know in New York who's going to be calling me at 6 o'clock in the evening? And it was my editor. And she said, I've got some news for you. She says, you've made the New York Times bestseller list. Now, at the time, they had a separate list for mass market paperbacks, which is how mine was published. And I made what was called the extended list. They only ever really published the top 20, and then they counted another 15. And I think I was like number 33. Almost, not quite there, but it didn't matter. I had made the list. And the next several books did that too. And then finally, the 5th book in the series, which was the last one to come out as a paperback original, it debuted on the New York Times list at number 8. And I mean, to this day, I still find it hard to believe. After that, they started publishing them first in hardcover, and there went the end of the bestseller because the books don't sell as fast and as well in hardcover as they did in mass market paperback. But anyway, I can legitimately put that on they can put it on my book covers. And I also have made the USA Today list at the very bottom, toward the very bottom of the list 2 or 3 times. So, it was a dream come true to me, but I mean, it was 25 years in the making from the time, that was in 2010 when that first book came out. And 25 years from 1985 when I wrote that first adult mystery. So as I have told people in the past, I'm a 25-year overnight success, but of course I'm luckier than most. And fortunately, readers have really taken to the characters and made the series very, very popular. It's still going strong. Book 14 came out back in August, What the Cat Dragged In. I'm not sure, it may be coming up reversed on in your view, and I'm working on 15, and there are 2 more under contract after 15. So we'll see what happens after that. But it's been a lot of fun writing this series. A lot of readers who read this type of book, which is called a cozy, because there's no real blood and gore, there's no real violence, and there's no graphic sex, of course. Doesn't mean the characters don't have it, they just don't have it in front of you. And that's the kind of book I enjoy reading. And I think in recent years, ever since 9/11, cozies have become more and more popular because they present a world that's understandable. Something bad happens, but you can make sense of it, and the bad guy gets caught and punished. And with everything that's gone on the last 20 years, that's not always the case. And I think a lot of readers like to escape. And you can escape into these books. I mean, one of the nicest compliments I ever get from readers is that, I was having a hard time because, they lost a family member, or they'd been having a terrible month or whatever, but they read one of my books and they temporarily forgot about what was going on. And to me, that is a big tribute, because I know at very important times in my life during losses and stress, reading has been my escape. Because I always know when my stress level is at its very highest level, because all I want to do is reread some of my favorite writers like Georgette Heyer and Elizabeth Peters and some of those people, because their books pull you in and you can completely forget about what's going on around you. So the fact that people can do that with my books, as I said, is a great, great compliment. The main character is a man named Charlie Harris. And in the first book, he has been living back in his hometown in Mississippi, Athena, Mississippi, which is very loosely based on Oxford, Mississippi, the home of the University of Mississippi, because I wanted a college town. But he's been living there. He inherited a house from his great aunt, who had passed away not long after his wife. They both died of pancreatic cancer. And he had worked for the city of Houston long enough that he qualified for his pension. So he quit that job, moved back to Mississippi. And not long after he moved there, he found this cat out in the shrubbery outside the public library where he was volunteering during, really, bad weather. So he took him to the vet and got him checked. And he thought the cat was full grown. But the vet said, "Oh no, this is a kitten. It's a Maine Coon." And for those of you who know about Maine Coons, you know that they are the largest breed of domestic cat in the world. I mean, the only thing that comes close, I think, are the Norwegian forest cats. And they're very similar. So anyway, Diesel, he named him Diesel because of his loud purr. And eventually Diesel, by the time the series opens, Charlie has had Diesel for a couple of years. And he's just beginning to attain his full growth. And Diesel at full growth weighs about 36 pounds. And that is large even for most Maine Coons. I mean, most male Maine Coons top out about 26 pounds. But I had a very dear friend, a writer, whom I've already mentioned, Elizabeth Peters, whose real name was Barbara Mertz. A friend and I were visiting her once in her home in Maryland. And Barbara was a huge cat person. She loved dogs, so she always had 6 or 7 animals around at any one time. And my friend Beth and I were sitting there in her living room talking to her. And I looked over and suddenly this bobcat looking thing comes walking into the room. He was enormous. And I thought, did somebody leave the door open? And no, it was Barbara's Maine Coon. His name was The Diesel. He was named for a Washington Redskins running back, John Norris, the Diesel. I don't know. I don't follow football. So anyway, but he was the sweetest, most gentle cat. He took a shine to my friend Beth. He weighed 40 pounds, and he wasn't overweight. And he climbed up in Beth's lap and, wouldn't get out, which caused problems when she wanted to get up, but he really took a shine to it. But I had never seen a cat like that. So when the editor came to me and said, "We want you to write this series," well, of course, that cat popped into my head immediately. And I really didn't know that much about Maine Coons, and I've learned a good bit since. So that's where Diesel came from. So I had Diesel and Charlie, and I had Charlie living in his aunt's house, which is a big 3-story house. My great aunt, my dad's mother's sister, had a boarding house in Jackson for many years, from like the 30s up until the 60s. And I vaguely remember it as a child, and it was a big house with several stories. And so I thought, what if, this house was a boarding house too? And Charlie's aunt used to keep boarders, male students from the college, Athena College. So I kept that for the first book. It's kind of gone by the wayside a little bit in later books. But in the first book, one of Charlie's boarders is accused of murder. And Charlie doesn't think this young man, who is a freshman at the college, could have done this, so he gets involved. In addition to the house, he sort of inherited his aunt's housekeeper, Azalea Berry, who is a Black woman of a certain age, who has, shall we say, presence. She's one of those ladies that you don't mess with, white or Black. This ladies of this type you do not mess with. And Charlie's a little bit afraid of her. And she cooks and cleans and stuff, and she doesn't think much of the cat to begin with. But her daughter, Kenesha, is a deputy in the sheriff's department in this county. And Kenesha doesn't think her mother should be working as a domestic. She thinks it's demeaning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So she's not real fond of Charlie because she thinks it's Charlie's fault that her mother is still working. So there's a bit of a clash there. And then they clash, of course, when Charlie is playing detective. Now, over time, one thing about series is you can have relationships grow and change. And Azalea has softened toward Diesel, and she's also softened a little bit toward Charlie. She's come a little less, distant. And Charlie and Kenesha have also got a better working relationship. And for me, that's what's a lot of fun about all this, is that you can, over time, instead of coming up with a completely new cast of characters every time, you can have these relationships and see them develop. And for a writer, that's a lot of fun. I know people who, once they've written a book, they're through with those characters, they don't want to see them again, so they want to come up with something new. But, you meet these characters and you like them. I mean, do you only see your friends once in your life and then you never see them again? No, stop it. I'm about to have an fight in here, sorry. And so I think that's why people like these series. They meet a group of characters they like, and then they can revisit them whenever they want. Either they can reread the books, or they can, when the next book comes out, they can revisit these people. And I love series that way myself. Amelia Peabody from the Elizabeth Peters books is one of my all-time favorite characters. And not only do you see the history of Egyptian archaeology, written by a woman who was the first woman to get a PhD in Egyptology from the Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago at the age of 25. I mean, Barbara was one of the most intelligent, frighteningly intelligent women I have ever known. And she did more to popularize Egyptology in this country than any other person has ever done. And so the books are, they're also lessons in the history of archaeology, as well as, entertaining mysteries. So it's fun to go back and spend time with them. And I'm at the point now where, I might have read the book yesterday, but that doesn't mean I'm going to remember the whole plot today. And some of these I first read 30 and 40 years ago. So rereading them now, it's like almost reading a new book. But over time in the series, of course, things have changed in Charlie's life. In the second book, in the first book, I tell the readers that he has two children, a son who is a corporate lawyer in Houston, and a daughter who is an actress trying to make her way out in California. Well, in the second book, Charlie's son shows up and says, "Dad, I quit my job. Can I stay with you for a while?" So no more empty nest. And Charlie's relationship with his son, whose name is Sean, had been a little fractured after the death of Charlie's wife and Charlie moving away and everything. So it's a chance for them to get to know each other again, and for Sean to kind of find himself a little bit. So that was kind of fun to explore. And then the third book, his daughter shows up. She's there though on business because she's going to be doing workshopping with the theater department at the college. And it just so happens the writer who's been invited to be the writer in residence is an old boyfriend of hers, who turns out to be an obnoxious you know what. And of course, what do you do with characters like that? You murder them, right? You know, so, and of course, Laura, you know, seems to be the chief suspect because she had been romantically involved with him. So, you know, by the third book, I have both his children there, and they begin to have relationships and develop, and, you know, eventually marriage and children and so forth. And Charlie also reconnects with one of his high school classmates, Helen Louise Brady, who owns a French bistro in town. Helen Louise, you know, went off to got her degree in law and practiced law for a while, but she finally got tired of it. So she went off to Paris and went to the Cordon Bleu, or one of those fancy cooking schools, and then came back to this little town and opened the French bistro. And I get to write about, you know, different kinds of pastry and things that I would love to have. And stuff. And of course, Azalea cooks good old-fashioned Southern meals for Charlie. And so I can remember fondly meals that my mother and my grandmother used to cook, and, you know, sadly, which I am unable to cook. People love reading those descriptions of meals, although I really only sort of list the food. I don't do recipes or anything like that because that's beyond me. But all of these things, I think, kind of give texture to the series because, you know, you've got the plot of who gets murdered and how you find out how that was done, but you have to have more than that in a book. You know, these other characters and the relationships, they are what give the book's texture. And I think it's the characters that bring readers back. I mean, I think I'm a pretty fair plotter with, you know, whodunit and everything, but I think it's the character relationships is what, you know, drives the series. But I always try to come up with a good plot. So, let's see, where are we doing on time here? One of the things that people always ask is, why are you Miranda James? And why were you Jimmy Ruth and Honor and everything? Well, I learned a bitter lesson with my first books that were published. You know, they were all published under Dean James. Well, you go Google that right now and see what you get. You get a lot of stuff about a dead movie star. You know, and that's been the bane of my existence most of my life because, you know, my parents insisted on calling me by my middle name. So every school year, they say, James Dean, where are you? And I say, no, it's Dean James. And people still do that to me, you know, 60 odd years later. So I decided that, you know, having a pseudonym, something that was a little more, I'm groping for the word now.
Unusual.
Less, more distinct, there we go, would work. And so with the Trailer Park series, Jimmy was my dad, Jimmy James. You know, my grandfather insisted on having a little boy named Jimmy James, and then Ruth was my mother. So Jimmy Ruth, and of course in the South, Jimmy is a girl's name too. And I picked Evans because it would put my books on the shelf next to Janet Ivanovich, who's a huge bestseller. You know, trying to be marketing savvy. Well, it didn't work in the long run, but, you know, I managed to do 5 books. And then Honor Hartman was for the couple of books I did about a trio of women in Houston who were bridge players. Because I had learned to play bridge by then, and I loved playing it, and it just gave me an excuse to write about bridge and everything. And unfortunately, that only made it to 2 books. But then came Charlie and Diesel and the Cat in the Stacks. And Miranda, I wanted to use my own last name. And then I chose the name Miranda from The Tempest, my favorite Shakespeare play. And it also means to be loved. I mean, to marvel at, excuse me. Amanda is to be loved, Miranda is to be marveled at. But I just like the combination Miranda James, and I can remember how to spell it when I'm signing books. So that's how Miranda came about. And it's also fairly distinctive. If you Google Miranda James, you pretty quickly find my books. So there is a spinoff from the Cat in the Stack series. In the 4th book in the series, Out of Circulation, the plot revolves around a Friends of the Library fundraiser for the college library. I'm sure none of you have ever done that. And you know, in any group like that, no matter what your goal is, there are going to be opposing opinions about what to do and how to do it, right? You know, just like every church committee you've ever been on and so forth. So I came up with some very strong personalities to be on this committee. And two of them are elderly sisters who are based on actually two sisters I know who are much younger and who are married, both have children, and one of them has grandchildren now. But in the books, the Decoding Sisters are 80 and 84 and have never been married. But their personalities are pretty much come straight from these two friends of mine. And they get a kick out of it because they think it's hilarious. At some point, I wanted to write another series. And I've always loved older women detectives because of Miss Marple, who is one of my all-time favorites. And I pitched this idea to my editor and my agent. And, you know, Out of Circulation had already been published and everything. And my editor said, well, you've already got these two great characters. Why not use them? I thought, well, okay, that's an idea. I mean, it's going to up the body count in this little town a lot, but, you know. So anyway, I've done 4 books so far about the Decoding Sisters. They exist in the same world, but, you know, Charlie doesn't appear in those books. 2 of them are set in town and 2 of them are set away from town. And I would love to continue that because I do love the characters, but they just simply have not sold as well. But they do continue to appear in Charlie's books because I can't let go of them. They're just too much fun. So what was I going to say? Well, I think I've babbled enough now. See if y'all have questions. I think I saw somebody ask whether I had a Maine Coon.
Yes, let's go to the question and answer. Okay, Gretchen, you think that's good? Okay.
Yes.
I want to say that we do have 2 other out of town here. Barbara is in Seattle and it's raining, and Jen is in Dallas, and I bet it's cold because they said that's what's coming this way. And we're happy to have you. Let's see. Do you have a Maine Coon?
I do not. All 4 of my cats are rescues, and you know, the universe decided that you know, they needed to come to me. I have an older pair that I've had about 10 years. They came separately, but you know, they're about the same age. And then 4 years ago, I adopted a pair of brothers who are tuxedo cats.
Oh yeah.
And I had a different pair prior to getting all 4 of these. And they were both sweet, but one of them talked some and the other one didn't talk much at all. I now have 4 who like to talk. You know, so I get complaints and all kinds of stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I had a Maine Coon, but as I said, the universe decided otherwise. So
we have in the chat box, please tell us your routine for writing. That is every day at a certain time or other. When do you write?
Oh, I wish I had a routine. Yeah, part of the issue for me is that I still work full time, and my job requires me to be at the computer all day long. And so usually when I get home in the evenings, the last thing I want to do is sit down at the computer for 2 or 3 more hours. So I don't. When I do the bulk of my writing, it's on the weekends or during time off or holidays and things. But one of the things about writing is, and it's hard sometimes for people who are not writers or who are not creative to understand, is that writing is not just sitting and writing something on a piece of paper or typing at a keyboard. A lot of writing goes on in the background, in your brain, in your subconscious, because that's where it really comes from. You know, it's not necessarily just the keys on the keyboard. Although, you know, that helps when you're sitting at the keyboard, because I mostly do keyboard now. I can't write longhand for very long without my hands cramping. So I'm used to the keyboard. But that does help it flow. But, you know, I spend a lot of time thinking over the story, and I come up with a basic situation. Like in the book I'm working on now, prodigal son who ran away when he was 17. He ran away from an abusive father. He's very gifted musically, and he was horribly abused by his father. So he ran off to California and eventually became really famous as a composer for films and also a singer in a band and everything. And he's finally coming home as an artist in residence. I did it once with writing, now I'm doing it with music, and bringing him home for that. And Charlie's really good friend, whom he's known since childhood, Mel McGilly, who works in the library with him. You know, she's had a sort of a crush on this guy all these years and has kept in touch with him. But anyway, he's coming back. And of course, because he comes back, bad things are going to happen. Because there are people who have grudges against him. And here he is daring to come back, and he's now within target distance. So that was the basic premise. And I think people are going to be surprised because the victims are not going to be who are expected to be the victims, I'll say. And this is the first time in a while that I've had a very clear vision of what the end of the book is going to be. I mean, I literally saw this. And I'm not one of those people who dreams, you know, the ending of the book or that kind of stuff. I have friends who do that, but not me. My dreams are far too weird. But I actually saw the ending scene of the real climactic scene of this in my head. Mm-hmm. It's really unusual. So maybe after 30-something books, I'm having a breakthrough. I don't know, or else I need to get my head examined. Mm. You know, so I've got to work to that point though, because I have to write from A to B to C to D, you know, in a logical progression, because that's how my mind works. I have a friend who can write she'll write, you know, a scene in chapter 7, and then she'll go back to chapter 2, and then she'll go to chapter 6, and it just drives me crazy to think about it. Yeah. But I have to be, even though I know something's coming, I don't write it until I get to it. You know, that's not the way Mrs. Drew taught me to write. You know, it's a very legal, precise. You know, you do this in a logical way, kind of building your argument in a historical paper. So that's how I work. And because of that, usually the first 100 pages is the hardest for me to get through, because every time I sit down to write, I'm thinking, how did I do this? I mean, how did I manage to do this before? I don't know what the heck I'm doing. This just seems like, you know, trying to manipulate mud and make it something. And, you know, other writers do this too. It's not just me, and even better writers than I am. But it's basically what you call imposter syndrome. You know what I mean? You think you're going to be exposed at any moment for being what you do. But, you know, it takes me about 100 pages or so to really get into the book and to feel like, okay, yeah, I do have a story here. It's going to become a book. And then, you know, it starts picking up steam. And then there toward the end, as long as my body can hold up, I'm banging on the keyboard, you know, because I'm excited to get to that point in the story. Because I think if I'm not entertaining myself, how can I hope to entertain you? You know? I wrote something that bored me. I mean, why would you want to read?
And apparently you do have a muse, because this comes to you in a dream or in your brain.
Well, I think it's getting revved up, you know, when I'm at that critical point where the book really starts flowing. Mm-hmm. I think that's where the juices really, the synapses really start firing and connecting like should they? Because I tell people, you know, I think creativity is really a muscle, you know, and the more you exercise it, the more reliable it is. It's like you get on the treadmill and walk for, you know, half a mile on Tuesday, and then you get back on it on Sunday and walk half a mile, and then the following Thursday you walk half a mile. You're not going to make any progress. But if you walk half a mile consistently, soon you'll be walking a mile, and then 2 miles, and then 3 miles, and so on. And that's my problem. I am not getting on that treadmill and walking it consistently enough. And but when I do get on that treadmill, I burn rubber.
Oh, well, you're certainly producing. We can see that from the number of books you've written. We have some more books, questions in the chat box. One from Gretchen is, does it help sales to be next to PD James?
Oh, Cousin Phyllis. Yes, no, it doesn't hurt.
And then what advice would you give aspiring authors? That's from Amanda.
Okay. Well, from Amanda, I mean, a couple of things. First of all, write what engages you. Don't try to write something just because you think it will sell. If you don't really like mysteries, don't force yourself to write one. If you like space opera, write space opera. But you bring your own perspective to it. Write what engages you, because as I said, a few minutes ago, if I don't engage myself, I'm not going to engage anybody else. So write what really, really that you're passionate about. And the other thing too, and of course, I'm preaching to the choir here, read good books. Also read a few bad books and see if you can tell the difference. Why is this such a bad book? And I can give you several bad books you can try, which I think are real stinkers. But, read the bad, read the good. In my case, writing mysteries, I have sort of over, 50 years of reading mysteries, I've absorbed a lot about the structure. Particularly the type of book I write, like the Agatha Christie type and Carolyn Hart and people like that. It's very kind of a structured kind of thing. And so I can write a book without even having to think about that stuff, because I've absorbed that structure. And that's kind of where you want to be, And you can take classes and writing and drama and stuff, but over the years, I learned from Shakespeare class and English novels and various things. By the time you get to, where you've graduated from college, if you've got a liberal arts degree, you've absorbed a lot of this. But really, write what you're passionate about. And then the 4 words that I need to pay attention to more than any, the late Bill Kreider, who was a Texas writer, who wrote mysteries. He said the best 4 words of writing advice he ever heard were keep butt in chair. And it's true. It's true. Although, as I said, not all writing is done sitting in a chair. Just keep that in mind. So,
Nancy asks, what's the name of the new book? What name will this new book have? It says, what name will this new book be written under?
Oh, it'll be Miranda James.
Okay.
Yeah, Miranda's doing all the writing now.
Barbara, ask your question. I'm not sure I'm getting it all. Where are you? There you are. Unmute.
I see.
I was wondering if you hear the voices of your characters, just like you probably know what they look like in your mind, and you have their character. And the reason I ask that is because your voice makes me think of my mother's description of her mother's voice. She was from, it's a very small town in Mississippi, and it just flew out of my head, but her voice was described as mellifluous, and you have that, and maybe I'd go to Mississippi and find out everybody has that voice.
Well, there are many people here who do. And I've lost, most of my Mississippi drawl, although I can sure find it again if I need to.
Yes, I understand, since I visit my mother in Texas a lot. So when I come back. But
no, it's still very alive and strong here in Mississippi.
So do you imagine the voices of your characters? Do you speak in she would sound like this and he would sound
to some degree, yeah. And for certain bits of dialogue, I will read them aloud.
Mm-hmm.
written them just to make sure that the cadence seems right and everything.
Okay.
And I was writing the trailer park books. I wrote those in the third person, but they were all in third person point of view from a main character, Wanda Nell. And I really paid attention to Wanda Nell's vocabulary and the way she said things, because she graduated high school and was very smart, and it could have gone if there had been the money there and everything. And she still a lot, but she's still a woman with a high school diploma in Mississippi. And so with her, I try to be very careful, in that book, because we're talking about basically lower class working people.
Thank you.
Linda has and we'll probably wrap up with this because we need to talk a little bit about what's in the future. It seems Houston has several independent bookstores. Murder by the Book, Brazos, Blue Willow. Is this unusual, and are these stores thriving despite big box stores?
It's not unusual. I mean, independent bookstores have made comeback across the country. There are some closing, but there are others opening, and I don't know that they're exactly thriving right now, but they are holding their own because they provide services that you're not going to get, by a click of the mouse. The signed books, the virtual events, and so forth, like this. Murder by the Book, I know, is starting to have a few events in person again. But when I worked there, we prided ourselves on our service. Making sure that we got you the books that really fit what you like to read and stuff, and things that were handpicked for you. And that's not something a computer can do for you. No matter what the algorithms are, it's just not the same as a human interaction. That's what's kept these places going, that human touch. I don't know if any of you have read, I had never read Louise Erdrich before, but I read her new book, The Sentence. And, she owns a bookstore in Minneapolis. And this is a fascinating book because it's about that bookstore and a character who works there who is haunted by the ghost of a dead customer. And it was fascinating to me to read, having worked at a bookstore and occasionally feeling haunted by a customer who had passed on. We had some real Lulus. We had the most wonderful people, and they still do. But we had a few Lulus over the years who were eccentric beyond imagination. But anyway, if you haven't read the Louise Erdrich book, The Sentence, I recommend it highly. It deals, of course, with what happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd. The book's actually close to where it happened. And it's an incredibly compelling book. And if I could have stayed up all night to read it in one sitting, I would have. I read her before, but I'm certainly going to look at some of her other books. But she helps you understand, I think, what drives an independent bookstore and what makes it important to the community.
Well, that's fascinating. We're glad to have a recommendation and to get the names of your books, because I can, my computer's going to be talking to, with SRUW, we have a special deal with Bookshop. And
right. That's the independent.
Remind everybody to order from them, and you'll benefit SRUW as well as have some good reading. I want to thank you. This has been fascinating, and
thank you.
And of course we're interested in your cats, and that's great that they're in your books. And I want to thank Gretchen for making arrangements for this meeting tonight. And I see Meg is here. She's our social media person, and I want everybody to check our SRUW Facebook. And our next meeting is on the 24th, and it's Sarah Lohman, Rice Vice Provost and University.
Sarah.
Yeah.
I know Sarah, yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't you join us?
Well, to be honest, this is a little past my bedtime.
Well, yes, you're not in the central zone, are you?
No, I am. I am. It's
you?
just that I get up around 4:30. So but it's a pleasure to talk to groups like this. It really is.
Well, our meeting next time is going to be at 12 noon. So maybe they'll fix it a little bit better. And of course, you may be at work, but we welcome you if you want to join us.
Sure.
Miranda, are we ready for a picture?
I've got it. I'm ready. I'll count it down.
Okay. Well, everybody who can put a video on so that we can see your face, do it so that we can take a picture for our Facebook page. You count it down, or should I?
You go ahead. I'll do it on your count.
1, 2, 3, smile.
I got a few.
Okay, great. Well, I thank everybody who's here, and I hope to see you on the 24th at noon. Our speaker will begin about 12:30, but you're welcome to join us at noon. Anything else I need to say, Miranda?
Bye-bye, everybody.
Oh, bye-bye, Dean. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. We'll close the meeting.